Are you looking for a vehicle that's capable of taking you to outdoor activities or a parade? Well, then you might be in the market for a Subaru Crosstrek. That's right beside me today, I got a 2016 Subaru Crosstrek. And Subaru has a bunch of loyal enthusiasts for their brand, some of the most loyal buyers out there. But today we're gonna discover if they are also reliable. We're gonna take a look at some of the issues and things that you need to look out for if you are in the market to purchase one of these, and if you buy one, if it'll last to 250 or 300,000 miles. We're gonna take a walk around the outside, we'll talk about the common problems, and then we are gonna decide if the Subaru Crosstrek is a buy or a bust. Starting up front for our walk around on our Subaru Crosstrek, and I actually think these are kind of a fun little sized car. Now, as far as Subaru style, that's up to you. I'm kind of indifferent to it, but I do think it's pretty much a classic Subaru design. As far as cosmetic wear and tear, some of the black plastic and things like that is faded, but the paint itself has held up really nicely. I don't have too much to say. Obviously, if you're in a rust area, you should look under it and make sure that you don't have any crazy rust issues or anything like that, but rust on the body on these is not a super typical issue. However, there has been some issues with the fuel lines and brake lines rusting, so I would check those out for sure. Even the headlights have held up pretty well, but I do think as these age, they will get pretty oxidized because that is a typical Subaru problem. Not hard to correct, but it is something to look at. Under the hood of our Crosstrek here, we got the boxer engine, the 2-liter 4-cylinder that makes 148 horsepower and 145 pound-feet of torque. Now, those numbers on paper seem a little bit low, so we'll see how it goes on the test drive. Now, if you're familiar with the boxer engine or Subarus of old, you know that they had a bunch of head gasket issues. That would have been the #1 issue that I would be talking about here if this was an older Subaru. However, they've largely fixed those issues. It's not really a concern to me much anymore. Could happen, but is not nearly as common as it was in the past, and I'm really not concerned about that being an issue on these engines. Now, head gasket issues are the positive. The negative is there's still gasket issues. It is for the cam carrier housing, which is just where a bunch of the internal compartments for the head of the engine are located. And that gasket will leak oil. So this is a major car that I would look under and make sure that you do not have any oil leaks, because it is an in-depth process to fix that issue, unfortunately. Now, you could just keep adding oil and it'll probably run for a long, long time. That is one of the #1 issues on this engine. Next thing, if I was looking at a used one, would be when I start it up and just make sure that I don't have any smoke, because they also burn a little bit of oil as a common issue, or sometimes even a lot of oil. But just make sure that you don't have any smoke back there, any oil smells, and you should be good to go. Now, beyond oil leaks, which always check your oil and make sure that it's topped up and at the correct operating level so you don't cause major issues for yourself, we'll talk about an issue that is annoying but small, and that is the exhaust system. The exhaust system is known to have heat shields that rattle loose, just rattle in general. If you start the car up and you hear a bunch of noise underneath, it's likely some of those shields that have broken loose. Now let's move on to the transmission, which Subaru calls Lineartronic, which just really means it's their version of a CVT transmission. CVT transmissions do not have a great reputation in the automotive industry for how they drive and their reliability. And while some of them drive better than others and some are more decently reliable, these ones, unfortunately, are not one of them. These transmissions were known from new to fail between 80 and 100,000 miles. Subaru actually extended the warranty to 100,000 miles on them because of customer complaints and concerns and things like that. And a lot of them actually did get replaced. That's the good news. The bad news is I don't know that the second transmission is really going to last any longer than the first transmission. If you're looking at one of these to purchase, I would absolutely take it on a good long test drive and make sure the transmission operates as it should. CVTs don't shift, so you're gonna feel a different experience than most cars if you're not familiar with that, but just make sure that the engine doesn't rev up really high, or you have some crazy clunks or anything like that. And also, if you actually own one of these cars, you need to change your fluid in there about every 30,000 miles to prevent any major issues happening to your transmission as much as you can. Now, before we leave under the hood, we got to talk about all-wheel drive, and that's obviously the thing that Subaru is famous for. This car is all-wheel drive, and their all-wheel drive system is one of the better ones on the market. You're not going to have a lot of issues with them in general. Obviously, something could pop up, but really they make a pretty good all-wheel drive system. Moving on to the interior of our Crosstrek here. This is a very typical Subaru interior, and honestly, I kind of like them. They put soft materials in the things you kind of interact with while still being an extremely basic interior. I mean, it is one of the most simple looking interiors. You got actual knobs for most things inside here. You got a bunch of steering wheel controls and things. I actually really kind of like the interiors in these cars, even though they are not luxurious, fancy, anything like that. And overall, they hold up pretty decent. There's a few things that we need to talk about and to look for if you're looking at a used one. Steering wheel, even on this car, is pretty much worn out. The leather has lost all of its shine and is kind of cracked in different things. So that's something to look out for. The other is seat bolsters. Even this car has the seat bolster wearing out for sure, and you're going to find that on a lot of these cars. So a couple things that would make your car unsightly you got to look out for. Now, as far as electronics, honestly, one of the better cars that I have actually been around as far as owner complaints and things like that. Not a lot of electronic issues. Of course, your windows could stop working or a switch go bad or your AC could stop, but nothing that is overly common. Check it out as you're looking at a used one if you're going to buy one, and you should be good to go. It does have a navigation infotainment screen, but it is quite antiquated at this point, but not terribly glitchy or anything like that. Really, I think Subaru did a pretty good job on the electronics as well. Moving on to the rear seat area of the Crosstrek. And I gotta say, my first impressions are pretty good. The seat does sit a little bit low and feels maybe a little bit small. I'm 5'9", I got plenty of legroom, got plenty of headroom. It's not massive, but it's okay for a smaller car. I like that they kept the same soft materials from the front door panels. They brought them back here. They didn't cheap out on that. Nice touch. As far as actual features, wear and tear, things like that, I don't have much to say. Obviously, you could have some seat wear if you use the rear seat a lot, just like the front seats. But otherwise, I think you're going to be good to go for the long haul. You got cup holders in the door and power windows, and that is the end of your features in the rear seat. And now on to the trunk. Nothing really to look out for on these cars as far as the trunk goes. Decent space. You can take some stuff along with you, but not a massive trunk area. And you might have to use the roof racks up top if you really want to bring all your luggage along. Your mountain bikes, your skis, your kayaks, probably gonna have to use the roof mount. Pulling out now onto the highway in our Crosstrek, and luckily today we got a nice clear stretch of road, so we're gonna get on it. No shifting, just listen to hear if the transmission like revs up real high or anything like that. It actually feels pretty good. Now, as far as power, transmission felt fine. As far as power, it is minimal. It is not a fast vehicle. You are going to think about it before you merge onto the highway. I was worried about those power numbers when we were under the hood there, and I think those fears were kind of just validated because it's just not very fast. I think you would get used to it. I think it would be fine, and there's other slower cars out there. It's really not an issue for day-to-day driving. I don't think it's not that slow, but it's certainly not a race winner by any stretch. Now, one of the good things about this car for a little all-wheel drive, it's small but decent sized interior, things like that, is the fuel economy. Fuel economy is rated at 26 and 34. Pretty good numbers, especially for back in 2016. I don't hate those numbers at all. I think that's pretty decent, and it'll work out well for most people and save you a little bit at the pump and still have an all-wheel drive SUV. Now, as we're going here, I gotta say, Subaru has done really good in the newer cars, which I'm still considering this a newer car. I guess I'm showing my age a little bit. But cars back in the mid-2000s, they drove okay, but they drove more like a SUV or a truck than they did a Camry or a Malibu or an Accord. This feels very nice, even though the car sits up a little bit higher, things like that. I don't know that it feels quite as refined as one of the other mainstream non-all-wheel drive cars, but the steering feels really good. I got no play in it, anything like that. Now, if you're out on your test drive in one of these cars, obviously you want to take and really feel that transmission and make sure it's operating well. I can't state that too many times, and I'll probably do it more by the end of this video. But you do want to feel and make sure that you don't have any clicking or anything like that in the front suspension, because CV axles are pretty common. They're not the most expensive thing in the world to replace, but they are a common wear point on these cars. Now, the next thing to check is ABS lights, traction control, things like that, because these are pretty famous for wheel bearings going bad around 75 or 100,000 miles. Again, this is not a huge issue. If you have a humming noise, something like that, that might be your wheel bearing going bad, or like I said, those lights. This car has no lights on, seems to be running really, really smoothly. So I got no concerns on this particular car, but those are the things you want to look out for. Then just go over some bumps and just feel and see if there's any clunks, because there could be control arms, things like that. Anything basically underneath at 150,000 miles, you're going to be replacing. These don't have exceptional wear, I wouldn't say, on the suspension components, kind of average. Overall, I got to say I'm actually pleasantly surprised with this. Not as refined as some cars, but still a really decent driving experience. And even the CVT, I think when it's working, is one of the better CVTs on the market. Actually, I know that it is. It feels much more natural than a lot of CVTs. Your RPMs aren't crazy high all the time or anything like that. It's really only under really hard acceleration to even really notice it, which is good. I am a little concerned with some of the reliability on it. Back from the test drive, and now it's time to decide if the Subaru Crosstrek is a buy or a bust. The test drive went pretty well, actually. I think there is a lot to love about these cars. And while they aren't the most refined experience like some other vehicles, you can't ignore how awesome having all-wheel drive is, and a vehicle that is known to be able to handle some trails as well. The market on these cars with 150,000 miles, which is what we always base these reviews on, is right around $10,000. This actual car has a little bit less than that, so it would be a little bit more. Now, like I said, I do think there's a lot to love about these cars, and I think they would fit into a lot of people's life. However, I do have some reliability concerns. Luckily, we don't have to worry about head gaskets anymore as much, because Subaru really has fixed that issue for the most part. And I'm actually pretty happy with the engine overall. Now, the big Achilles heel is the CVT transmission. They do make a 5-speed as well, and my decision might be different for one of those cars. But the CVTs in these are just known to be unreliable. If you're looking at one, obviously take it on that good test drive and make sure it doesn't do any quirky things as you're driving, any clunks, slips, anything like that. But overall, I think it makes my decision today a bust. It's a shame, because I think it's a great car that is let down by the transmission, unfortunately. If you have one of these though, I want to hear about your experience. If you've had a great experience with it, please tell me about it. If you think there's something that I missed, or if you agree with me completely, I want to hear all about it in the comments down below. Appreciate you following along. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.